Like and subscribe! This is Undertale Soul Theory, something I personally invented. Now granted, if there's another thing called Soul Theory, we can probably call this something else. This is not affiliated with any pre-existing theory, other than it being my speculation on something that a lot of other people have speculated about, which is, what does the red soul mean? Now, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to go through all of the previously theorized options that many people have thought may be the answer to the question, and then go through each one's pros and cons. So here's all of our candidates. First off, we have determination. This option is definitely the fan favorite. If this were a dating sim, this would be everyone's first choice. And next off, we have the second primary theory, which is love. More specifically, two variations of love: literal love, the thing you're immediately thinking of right now, and of course, level of violence. Now, I'm going to be going through both of them individually as options to try to weed out if one of them doesn't work but the other does. And then lastly, something I'm throwing into the ring is courage. Now you may be wondering, where'd you get this idea? No one else has ever thought this, at least I think so. But you see, in Deltarune Chapter 1, when you try to talk to the king, Chris gets the ability of courage. And we know, based upon how Susie has the root element and her attack is called the Rude Buster, we can infer that this may be telling us something about Chris's soul, and if not the soul, the character. But hey, I've already mentioned one of our 3 Bachelor X's, so now I might as well introduce all of them to you. First up, we have Frisk, the first person we ever have met with a red soul. Frisk as a character can go many different ways depending on the route, but there's 2 general ways that Frisk can be viewed. First, on the genocide route, Frisk is very violent, killing everyone in the underground. But then inversely, on the true pacifist route, Chris is probably the nicest person that you'll ever meet. And there is a lot of inference based upon items and just general things about Frisk, like how you start with 0 level of violence or experience, that infers, at least before any route, Frisk was a very peaceful pacifist type person. Next we have the character you probably named after yourself, Kara. Kara was the sibling of Azriel Dreamer and the child of both of the Dreamer parents, and was also deeply depressed and presumably suicidal. And this anger towards the human race specifically brought Kara great anger and caused Kara to be a very violent individual, at least after death. Kara is also theorized to be the narrator, so I'll partially play that into things. But without any further ado, the person I mentioned earlier, Chris. Chris shares traits with both of the other 2 children, however, I do think that Chris shares a bit more with Frisk than Kara, and I know that's a bit of a hot take, but I'm not going to explain it. Either way, still a notable amount of similarities between the 3 of them, namely in Chris's direction of being the middle person. Now let's go through all of our options. I'm actually going to go in an odd order. First, I'm going to be covering the love theory / theory. So first, level of violence. This one definitely applies to Kara and totally can apply to Frisk, depending on the genocide route anyway. Though I don't know if it's either of the 2's most defining trait per se. After all, Kara was just deeply suicidal and probably would have benefited from some therapy. Meanwhile, Frisk, as stated earlier, does show signs of having been a very nice pacifist before the genocide route, and also the genocide route is completely optional, and the game punishes you for doing so. And I don't really think it fits with Chris at all. Chris doesn't show any signs of being mean, and any time Chris does something mean, it's under the control of us, the player. It's kind of like the Frisk situation, except Chris is literally being controlled by us, while Frisk is more dubious with that matter. Oh yeah, with Chris also having had a previous life, like an entire, notable life before we come to the equation, compared to Frisk, who pretty much has nothing. So now on to the second kind of love, the thing that obviously comes to mind to you. As said earlier, Frisk and Chris are pretty well known to be nice people. And Kara, on the other hand, is questionable? I could see the justification of, oh well, Kara did a lot of those evil things because of love for their adoptive Dreamer family. However, that's not a very good argument for the most defining trait of a character being love. Which then leads me to a slightly controversial conclusion with this theory, which is, I don't think that this one is true. At least not the shared one. And we've already proven the individual ones don't work either. And let me explain why. We are going for the path of least resistance with this answer because, that is the most likely answer. At least unless obviously confirmed otherwise. But okay, let's assume, right? Chris's trait, love, in the obvious way. Kara's trait is level of violence. and Frisk's depends on your route. Why would red be the only soul color that represents more than one thing? Unless bravery and kindness are acronyms, I don't think this theory is very likely, because simply no other soul color means more than one thing. And if it did, I'd think that both of those traits would have to apply to whatever character it belonged to. And it clearly doesn't with the 3 examples of a red soul we have so far. So, up next is courage, because I want to save determination for last. This definitely applies to Frisk, we never once see Frisk afraid, and this definitely applies to Chris because it's literally the name of one of their abilities. Now, we don't know much about Kara, but I could see courage being a defining trait for them, but in the same way that typical love is the defining trait of them. And hell, I feel like love has a bit more evidence for it in that regard. Though this is probably the only trait that completely fits Frisk regardless of the route, which is interesting. At least that we've gone over so far. And even though I made it up, I do have a single problem with this being the defining trait of the Red Soul, which is that it is really similar to bravery, and I don't really know what the difference would be. If you can think of a good distinction, tell me in the comments below, but personally, I don't understand how it could be too different from courage. Editing errors here. And you know that's true because I accidentally said courage instead of bravery. And now we've come to determination. But before we get truly into determination, I'd like to outline what every other soul color. First we have the red soul, then the orange soul, which represents bravery, the yellow soul represents justice, the green soul, kindness, the light blue soul, patience, the dark blue soul, integrity, the purple soul, perseverance. And the reason I bring this up is because I think the colors that are closely linked on this color spectrum reveal that there is in fact a gradient sort of system to what the souls mean. For example, right, justice. Justice being a combination of bravery and kindness makes sense. It takes bravery to do the right thing in face of adversity. Kindness mixed with bravery. Next, kindness. Now, kindness obviously takes some sort of sense of justice within yourself to do the right thing, or at least to know what the right thing is, and then use your kindness to act on that. But also kindness often takes patience. You need to be patient to be kind. Patience. It often takes kindness to be patient, I know that for sure. And it also takes a sense of integrity to be patient. So it makes sense that your defining trait would be patience if you have a mix of kindness and integrity. But you also can't really do this if you mix around the trait. If you have integrity and bravery, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have kindness. If you have justice and perseverance, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're patient. And now we have orange and purple left. Those are the only ones we don't know what they're made of. Well, other than half of each of them, of course. And the other half being the red soul, well, we don't know what the red soul means. So let's run through all of our options again, shall we? Love. You don't really require love of either kind to be brave, and you don't really require love of either kind to persevere. So next, we have courage. Now, we do know that if you took bravery, you could definitely get courage. As I said, they are incredibly similar. But I think they're too similar. I could definitely see how perseverance plays a role in this. You could definitely argue that courage could be a mix of being brave and being able to persevere no matter what happened. But I don't really feel like courage and justice would make bravery, or that courage and integrity would make perseverance. And that leaves us with one thing left. Determination. Now, determination is definitely a defining trait for Frisk. Frisk has the power to reshape the underground, that's how much determination they have. And I could see people trying to discount Kara from this, because Kara was suicidal and tried to take their own life. However, I don't know if that would really discount you from your soul type just because you were suicidal. Plus, we know that Flowey at least was suicidal at one point, and he's the second most determined character we've seen in the entire franchise. And then, though Chris can save, we don't know if this is a trait they possess in the Dark World because of determination, or if it's not because of determination, and if it's specifically because of it just being the Dark World, or if it's purely a gameplay feature. We don't know for sure, but it is possible. But there is something Chris does that we know requires determination, at least in some capacity, which is opening a dark fountain. Which then leads us to the weakest point of this theory, though. We know that every human has determination, just in general, in varying amounts, but we know for sure. And we also know that monsters do have at least some determination, some more than others, some are undying, some are Sans, varying levels here. And I don't want to get into darkness here because we simply don't know enough about them at this time for me to confidently say something definitively about them as evidence in this theory. And this leads to the main issue of, oh, well, these characters are all determined, but all humans are determined. It might not be special to them. All we know is they all have determination in at least some level. Maybe the Red Soul has more, evidenced by the saves, but maybe the saves in Deltarune aren't evidence of that, and we have no evidence that Kara could save at all. But then again, if you take determination and justice, it does make sense that would make bravery. If you combine determination and integrity, that creates perseverance with a specific distinction, by the way. in a way that courage didn't really have. Perseverance would then be similar to determination in the fact that you'll persevere through anything, but with a specific integrity, meaning that you will do the right thing, for example, versus determination where it's indiscriminate. You may not do the right thing, you may kill everyone in the underground, but you are still determined. And that is your defining trait. Though I do have one last bit of evidence for determination being a very defining part of Chris. Chris's soul is the only thing we know of that has enough determination to close a dark fountain. But then again, Chris is the only human in Deltarune, so it might just be a human thing, and Chris is the only human nearby. We don't know for sure. Granted, I think I've made my thoughts clear. I definitely think that determination is the answer for what the red soul is. Though obviously I don't know, and a few of you are on ideas, you can feel free to comment it. But before I go, I have one last bit of evidence that supports the determination side of this theory. The ball game that in-game tells you what every soul color means. The only way to beat that game is to play it over and over and over because you are determined to beat it. Do with that what you want. And do not forget to
like and subscribe!